Hello everyone, welcome to yet another fun-filled episode of State Champs eSports Atari 2600 edition. I'm Denver and today we are going to be playing the Activision game Megamania. Before we get started, as always, I have to thank our sponsors and give them some love. We've got Lawrence Technological University, Hungry Howie's Pizza, and of course, our good friends over at Army, Michigan. We thank them for their support and want to encourage and recommend and plead you to go check them out. Now, as you can see, I am flying what looks like a cross between the USS Enterprise and a Klingon battleship. And I'm shooting a bunch of different, what I would assume would be a bunch of alien vessels. Although, I don't know how much they actually look like alien ships. Now, in my doing some research, I was actually informed that these were not alien ships that you're shooting, but miscellaneous household everyday items like hamburgers and irons and bow ties. Apparently this game was supposed to be a bit of a spoof of all of the space adventure games that kind of really dominated the Atari 2600 era. In fact, it won an award, I think, for most humorous video game. Not sure there's a lot of other competition for that, but nonetheless, kind of shows you that everything was meant to be taken as a grain of salt, with a grain of salt. Now, as far as gameplay goes, you could see that your ship is limited to just the bottom row, so very much like Space Invaders with the aliens kind of marching down. Now the difference here being they are moving in a much more erratic pattern. And the other great thing is if you can evade the alien ships, you will not die. Whereas Space Invaders, if the ships get to the bottom row, if you will die automatically. Now my evasive maneuvering is not that strong, as you can see, but in theory, if I was able to maneuver around them, I could stay alive for as long as need be. Ooh, they got me. Now, one of the other things that I found out about this game while doing some research was that it is supposedly a pretty close ripoff of a Sega game called Astro Blaster, at least as far as gameplay goes. Now, like I said before, to me, the first thing I thought of was Space Invaders, and it really, in playing all these games for the stream, it really kind of brought home just how similar most of these games were. They would kind of find something that worked before and make slight tweaks and adjustments, and it would be just enough to I guess legally avoid copyright infringement. And I'm assuming that was the case for this game, since I did not see anything about any lawsuits. Now with the gameplay, you can earn an extra life by getting to 10,000, and the game will continue to play until you reach 1,000,000, and it will be over. And supposedly, back in the day when the game was first released, if you were able to get to 45,000, you could send Activision a shot of your screen, a photo of your screen, and they would send you a patch, which is, I guess, something that they did for other games. If I'm not mistaken, Freeway, there were some levels that would allow you to rack up a number of points, and you could send in screenshots of the game and get a Freeway chicken crossing the road patch. Now, I can safely say that I don't believe I ever, well, I guess that's not safely saying. I am confidently saying that I have never played this game before. So, I am enjoying it. A lot of the games that I played growing up, there's an automatic nostalgia factor, so you kind of probably like it, or I should say I like the games probably more than the average person, just because of the memories and the emotions that playing the game conjures up from my childhood. Now, the same cannot be said for a lot of the games that I had never played before. This game I've never played, and in all honesty, it's a lot of fun. It's right up my alley. It's simple, fast-paced, just enough variety to keep things interesting. And it's challenging, but it's not so challenging to where you get frustrated and you just want to kind of throw your hands up and stop playing. That's my problem with a lot of games, especially like the puzzle type games. They just take so long to figure out and to crack that I just, I guess my attention span was too short to really enjoy playing those games. But this one, it's got a good variety. It's challenging, but not impossible. And it just kind of proves my point that Activision was, for me, my favorite Atari 2600 game developer. I did crunch the numbers. I mentioned doing so yesterday in the last episode that we did, which was Freeway, because I stated or restated my love of Activision. I mentioned that I would kind of crunch the sales. I've got the top 20 list for the Atari 2600 cartridges, and I tallied up the Activision numbers, and they sold 9 million cartridges for the 2600 system, which firmly puts them at number 2. Now, of course, Atari the manufacturer of the gaming system itself, they were the highest grossing or highest selling number of cartridges, and that was just over 20 million. Now that's just for the top 20 games. I don't have the numbers for all of the Atari 2600 cartridges. I'm assuming that the Atari company had way more sales than 20 million, because I know they had many games that they produced. And coming in a not too shabby third was iMagic. They sold 4 million cartridges, which is under half of what Activision did. And the only other company in the top 20 was Parker Brothers, and they sold 3 million, which is, you know, pretty good, pretty close to iMagic. They were knocking at their door. Now what's interesting is, out of that 20 million, if you take out Pac-Man, which everyone hated pretty much universally, that puts Atari down in closer to the 13 million cartridges sold. And so that's not that far off from what Activision did. Now, obviously, you can't just wipe out Atari's biggest selling game of all time for the 2600. But the point I guess I was trying to make was, you know, this is not a quality list. Just because they sold more doesn't mean that they actually had better games. In my mind, Activision is still the champ of at least original Atari 2600 games, since most of the big games actually developed by Atari were ports from their arcade or other people's arcade games. And they had the money to get the rights to those big conversions. Now, I doubt I'm gonna make it to 45,000 here, but I'll give it a shot. Like I said, this being my first time playing the game, I just don't know how well I'll be able to pick it up. Now, Asteroids I played straight through on a single game for over an hour and flipped the score 2, 3, 4 times. I can't even remember. I think I lost track, to be honest with you. So yeah, so those games that I really played a lot as a kid growing up, muscle memory kicks in and I can really still do pretty well, all things considered. But this is definitely not the case, as you can see. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on this episode was the game's designer. Steve Cartwright is, from my research, one of the more interesting early Atari game developers or designers that I've come across. You know, we've talked about David Crane and Rob Fulop and some of the other big game designers who have, 2, 3, 4 games that they worked on that are all within the top 20 of the 2600 games. And to my knowledge, Steve Cartwright only had this game, Megamania, in the top 20. Although He did create two of my favorite games. Now, I haven't played either of those games in a long time, so my memory might be a little fuzzy, but Barnstorming was Steve's first game, and it was also came out in '82, same year as Megamania. And that was a lot of fun. You're basically flying an old-timey biplane through a bunch of barns. It's kind of like a racing obstacle course kind of a game. That was a lot of fun. And then there's also Sequest, which is an underwater, which the name would apply, underwater game where I believe you're a submarine and you have to shoot down different, like sharks and other boats and things like that. So it's two really great games in addition to this. And it's ironic that the two games that I was familiar with were not in the top 20. The one game I have never played was the more popular one. So just goes to show you what a young, dumb kid I was. I just probably picked it based on the cover art and not any sort of, sales chart. And to be honest, a lot of the games that I played were games that my friends had, and we would just trade. And so, they, like me, were also probably not real savvy as far as what the most popular games were at the time. Most of the games that I played were actually arcade games, coin-op ports to the Atari, which I've talked about in great depth on all of the other episodes that you can watch right now on not only our Twitch channel, but we've got a YouTube page. You can find them on State Champs Network, and there's a Retro Atari playlist that has all the episodes on there. And if you're a Facebook person, you can check them out on our Facebook page as well, State Champs eSports. Ooh. Bummer. Now, the really interesting thing about Steve Cartwright is, yes, he created these great games, and he actually, I believe, created 9 total different games for Activision in his time there, which is pretty impressive. But unlike a lot of designers who either left the gaming industry or left computer technology altogether, Steve actually kept getting, in my mind, better and better as the decades progressed. He kind of used his time at Activision as a bit of a launch pad. He was the 5th, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th designer hired at Activision. And after his impressive run with his 9 games there, he went on to Accolade, and even more importantly, was a staple over at Electronic Arts, EA, which at the time, I think we're talking late 80s, early 90s, that was probably my favorite. I moved on from the Atari 2600 to other platforms like the Commodore 64, and Electronic Arts was probably one of the best, if not the best, game developers at the time. And so Steve made a name for himself in this kind of new, more advanced era of games by producing the PGA golf games, the NBA basketball games, and even the Tiger Woods video games. So those were all huge, successful sports games, and Steve really kind of, I think, between that and these early Activision games, kind of cemented his place as one of the all-time greats in the video game industry. And he's still active, if what I read is correct, at different games, and did a bunch of different things. So quite an impressive fellow. Now there's one final game in the top 20 in the Atari 2600 top 20 best-selling list that Activision produced that I have not yet covered on our show, and that is the game Kaboom, which was a favorite of mine growing up. So I think maybe tomorrow I will play that, give you a little sneak peek. And then, of course, I've got to circle back around at some point and play Steve's other big Atari games, Sequest and Barnstorming. Alright, I'm going to make this my benchmark game. If you've seen any of my other episodes, what I like to do is set a high score and then let that be the litmus test as to whether or not I continue. So let's say I get 2,000. If I can keep beating that score, then I will continue playing. And if I cannot, then I'll throw in the towel. Call it an 8. Alright, come on. Let's see. Now, I have not yet gotten to 10,000, which is the extra life score needed. Did I just die? Ooh, okay, so 42, well, let's say we'll call it 4,300 is my benchmark score. So let's see if I can do a little less yapping and just concentrate on gameplay here. Okay, level 1. Now this is always the most challenging level for me here. I seem to get taken out the most, just because these guys will come right down on you. Those other levels are a bit of like a breather level. Ooh, darn! I knew that was gonna happen. You don't take out those lower lying ships, like right here. Oh shoot! Then you gotta just hopefully try to find a sweet spot. All right, no chatter. Let me start kicking some alien booty. Okay, dodged a bullet on that one. Ooh. And got it. Alright, 2,700. I gotta get to 4,300. Let's see. These guys are surprisingly hard to beat. You notice your laser doesn't shoot straight necessarily, which I find to be frustrating. All right, folks. Well, I guess that's it. I did not beat 4,300, and I did not even get a free life anytime during this round. So I'm going to go hang my head in shame until tomorrow when we play Kaboom. Thanks for watching. This is Denver from State Champs eSports, Atari 2600 edition. And before I go, I got to thank my sponsors, Lawrence Technological University, Army, Michigan, and Hungry Howie's Pizza.